Well, folks, this is Justin Bradford, and we are continuing our talk on hockey with another quick hit on the Russian Five, the documentary about the Detroit Red Wings. We have director Joshua Riehl joining us right now to talk about this. It's a fantastic documentary, and I cannot wait to see it this weekend here in Nashville. It's touring the country now. So, Joshua, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this is really exciting, and it's one of those things that, yes, obviously Detroit Red Wings fans love it and are going to continue to love it, but it's one of those things with hockey fans because it changed the aspect of the NHL and the way we view the sport in general, too, with bringing Russians over to play. So I know this is a long project for you as well. It took a lot of time and effort to put this together, and it took, 6-ish years for it to come together? What was that process like for you to put a project like this together?
Oh man, it's been a long journey. Yeah, it'll be about 7 years this fall since I started the project. Just initially with just writing letters to guys like Jim Lites and Jim Devellano and Ken Holland and Steve Yzerman and I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. I went down there for film school to go to the University of Texas at Austin. And Jim Lites was the first person to respond to me. And he, said, "Hey, if you're still in Austin, why don't you drive up I-35 to Dallas and let's have a conversation?" So we did, and he loved the idea. He loved my pitch. He told me there were a lot of people out before me that had wanted to do the documentary, The Story of the Russian Five. No one had really seen it through. But he liked my energy, and so he introduced me to Jimmy Devellano and Ken Holland. And so, slowly, over the course of about a year and a half, starting with Jim Lites and then finally with Igor and Sergey, I got kind of everyone on board to agree to do the project. And then it was, time to find the money. And then we found the money, but I moved back to Detroit and I met my producer, Jenny Fedorovich, through a mutual friend. And then she brought in Dan Milstein, who at the time was the agent for Pavel Datsyuk. And so, Dan saw an opportunity to kind of give me a chance to make my dream happen, but also a way to kind of give the NHL, give hockey fans a reminder of the legacy of what these five guys went through and did for the game. So, yeah, it's been a long journey.
A journey that's absolutely worth it, too. And so when you initially had the concept for this as well, obviously originally I saw Port Huron and everything, so grew up watching this as well too. What was the inspiration, especially as you noted too, others have had that idea, but what inspired you to take that next step to say, I'm going to make this happen as a project?
Yeah, so I think everyone who's thought about this has been inspired by the play of the Russian Five and their impact on the NHL, and that all goes without saying, and sort of speaks for itself. But for me personally, the thing that kept motivating me and pushing me every time we'd run into what seemed like a roadblock or an obstacle was that, when I was 19, I was in a car accident. And I didn't realize it, but I suffered an injury to my back, to my lower spine. And over the course of the next year, it sort of deteriorated to the point where I needed to have a surgery. And then I ended up having 3 surgeries over the course of 6 years. So kind of through all that time, frustrated, you're 19, 20, 21, 22, etc. You should be doing college things. You should be having fun and parties and all that. And instead, I was, having surgery and physical therapy, and watching 3 movies a day, depending on if the Wings or the Tigers were on. And so, Vladdy, kind of his perseverance through his injury was always inspiring. And then one Christmas, my grandparents got me Konstantinov jersey. And it was sort of a light bulb moment that was like, okay, what I'm going through sucks, and it's not great, but Vladdy went through so much worse, and, he persevered through it, and if he can do it, so can I. So that, that was sort of the moment that, crystallized. It's like, I can get through this, I can get back to my dream of becoming a filmmaker, and kind of, I guess, subconsciously filed it away of, this is a story I need to tell as my first feature-length documentary.
That puts a lot into perspective right there as well too, which I'm sure a lot of people will be interested to find out, because it's obviously something that there's a main story too, and we'll get to that later too about the accident and how the realization behind it. So you told me that you reached out to a lot of different people, and it seems like it was a lot of positive feedback. Was this one of those things that, I want to say the word easy, but with so much positive feedback, with getting people to buy into the idea of saying, yeah, I'll do it, of course?
there was nothing easy about this, but surprisingly, actually, that was one of the easier parts, which, and it took kind of getting legitimized. And I don't think that happened until Igor Larionov saw a teaser trailer that I cut together. When I pitched people, Jim Lights, Ken Holland, Jimmy Devellano, they were all super on board just based on the idea and my determination to do it. Igor is someone who, this is his legacy. And so when I first met him and pitched him, he was like, let's talk about it. And then we played phone tag and text tag for like 2 or 3 months, and I started getting worried that, it was going to slip away. So we cut this teaser based on a couple interviews that we shot during the Winter Classic when I had a chance to pitch these guys. Pulled a bunch of footage off of YouTube, sent it to him, and within a couple hours, he had sent back the rights agreement. So, I think once Igor legitimized it and said, okay, I'm in, that helped a lot. What also helped is that this is an important story, an important moment in all of these guys' lives. And I say that not just in their careers, but in their lives as people. Through the process of playing for the Stanley Cup and eventually winning the Stanley Cup, and then what happened 6 days later, like, these guys formed a bond that they will share for the rest of their lives. And it means so much to them. So I think once they realized that we were going to do our best to do justice to the story, it made it a lot easier for them to want to participate.
Man, well, you answered my next question, which is even better. I'm glad the way you answered it right there was perfect. So going through this now too, because I'm sure so much you wanted to talk about with each person. What was the preparation like for preparing to interview these players and to prepare to interview everyone? What was that process like of putting it together? It's like, I want to make sure we cover this, this, and this, and making sure you did that.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. First time I've been asked it. I knew what I wanted the story to be. The plot points were there. It's history. It's my job to find a way to make them work in a dramatic arc. But so I knew what our broad strokes were. And then I also, depending on each interview, kind of picked, like, what are the sweet spots where this specific person's perspective will be the most impactful. So for Stevie Yzerman, it was like, well, we have to cover the Dead Wings era with him.
Right.
And I have to really dig into the initial years of Russians coming over, because he was the captain and he was one of the few guys who was there through the whole process. And then obviously we have to talk about the Cup, and we have to talk about, what that meant. And then the limo accident and the press conference that he had to give. And, whereas someone like Chris Draper, it's let's focus on what watching the Russian Five meant to him, and then the Colorado brawl. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the brawl with Stevie, because that scene's perspective should be more about Darren and Brendan and Igor, who were on the ice. So it sort of became a sort of chess strategy of figuring out who can give me what, how much do I need from them. And then, of course, once you sit down with them, the reality is these guys are all super, super busy professionals. Most of them are still in hockey. So it's how do I get through everything that I want in the amount of time that they're willing to give me. So, Igor, we had all day. And Igor actually sat down for almost 4 hours with me. With a break in between. Sure. But like Sergei Fedorov, he was in between meetings, and when I actually sat him down, he asked me, what's this going to take, like 20 minutes? And if we flew to Moscow to interview Sergei and both Slava, so I was like, no, Sergei, I needed a bit more than that. And I had 10 pages of questions. Right. So luckily Sergei sat for an hour and a half, but I still would have loved another 30, 40 minutes with him. And then once you get into the interview, you kind of strategize how it's going and how receptive they are to certain avenues and questions. And then you just, pursue those lines. You figure out when you maybe are coming up to a point where if I keep pushing this idea, they're going to shut down and either end the interview, or the rest of the interview is just not going to be very good. And so you got to read that a little bit, decide, I going to keep asking Sergei about the limo accident, or am I going to move on, kind of thing? So.
Right, no, that makes perfect sense. And so you mentioned the Winter Classic, and luckily I was able to be there and cover the alumni game at Comerica Park and everything. And me growing up, because originally from Michigan, I grew up a Red Wings fan and moved to Nashville and obviously started following the Predators a little bit too. But I wigged out when I was able to be in a scrum with Sergei Fedorov and Steve Yzerman and things like that, so it was pretty neat. Did you have any of those moments where you're going, holy crap, I'm talking to this player?
You know, Scotty Bowman, yes. Mm-hmm. And Scotty was the first interview we did. And it was terrifying, and it was, I was drenched in sweat afterwards, and I just felt like it was like a bull run. I was just trying to hang on and not fall off because, you know, Scotty's notorious for not answering a question that you ask and answering it in the way that he feels like answering. And I'll give you an example. I wanted to warm him up, and I asked him, you know, what's your background with Soviet hockey? Hoping that I would get a piece of information that was good to establish why he knew about the Russian Five, that they would be so successful. And I got a 7.5-minute history lesson about, you know, the 1970s Soviet team's third line left winger. And it, you know, Scotty's got an encyclopedia of knowledge, and he dug into it, but it was like, I can't use any of this. And I also can't interrupt him and be like, Scotty, this is great, but I can't use it because he's fucking Scotty Bowman, you know? But once I got through that, I realized, like, that I didn't have the luxury of time to, like, geek out about these guys being, you know, these heroes that we all looked up to. I literally just had to treat it as a job. And, you know, Steve Yzerman sitting down, I want an hour and a half for him. He thinks he's only got an hour. How do I get as much of what I can get and hopefully keep him in the chair? That's all I'm thinking about at that moment. And then, you know, afterwards, after he leaves, after you break down the set, you're like, wow, we just had the captain here for almost 2 hours, you know, and that's pretty cool. But in the moment, you just don't have time.
Sure. No, the job has got to be done. And so kind of going into the film side and nerding out a little bit too, and looking at perspectives and what you wanted backgrounds to be in settings and aspect ratio, things like that. What were some of your main plans in terms of, were you really overthinking of the setting for some of these interviews or what you wanted them to be like, or was it wherever we can get them, we can get them? How much thought process was going into what you wanted to look like behind the interviews and things like that?
A lot of it, unfortunately, I would have loved to have had the luxury of time and ability to, you know, plan a lot more. But a lot of instances, it was, we got this guy. Well, so Stevie, it was, he called me Sunday night, or he texted me Sunday saying, hey, if you still want to do it, I'm in town, let's do it. But you got to find a place. And it was Sunday night. So it's like, well, I don't know where we're going to find a place Sunday night. Like, if I had more of the time, I could just call up anywhere in Detroit, say, I want to bring Steve Yzerman in for an interview, and they open their doors, but everything's closed. So, you know, we brought him to our studio, and we got a decent shot, but, you know, it's not something with the Joe in the background, or, right, you know, at the Joe with the scoreboard on the background, which would have been my dream shot. That said, you know, you try to work with the best that you have, and you try to find a aesthetically pleasing shot. I feel like for the most part we succeeded. There's a couple of shots that I still cringe at, but I also know that they're like just products of the situation, and you know, you do what you can. Sure.
No, I understand. I'm always just curious about that too, because it's something I'm trying to train myself to be better at, is thinking what's behind the person that I'm interviewing. So now, looking into the fan perspective, I know there's a few things I've read, so many different, you know, interviews and reviews and everything too, with Jeff Daniels and the locker room interview that he had as well. That's a really unique perspective to have, is a celebrity that was also a fan, a season ticket holder, a guy like that, to give his perspective and reflecting back on this. Just what was that like to get him in there and to interview him and have his thoughts on something like this from a fan perspective?
Well, I knew that, you know, because in my perspective, the fans are as much of a part of this story as the Russian Five and the guys on the ice. I think, like, sport is about community, and what made the Red Wings so special and made going to a playoff game at the Joe Louis Arena so special in that era was the vibe, right? It was the fact that there's 20,000 people who are just ready to explode, and everyone's there for the same reason, which is to cheer on their team. And like, you could be on any place on the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, etc. But for one night, we're all Red Wings fans, and so to me, that and I think that there's some subtext of that philosophical idea throughout the film of just coming together. And so, like, all right, I got to get a fan. I found the footage of Jeff Daniels, digging through archives, and I was like, oh, can we get him? He's a Michigan guy. Our producer, Keith Gave, sent an email to the Purple Rose Theater, and it kind of just went unanswered for like almost a year. And as we were wrapping up shooting, Jeff's assistant, or Jeff, I can't remember which, wrote us back, was like, hey, sorry I missed this. Is still interested? So I drove out to Chelsea with the crew, sat him down, and it was funny because I did not get any time to really talk to him one-on-one beforehand, kind of, build a little bit of rapport. So it makes doing an interview so difficult with that. And he was a little difficult with me in that sense. And there were lines of questioning that I wanted to go down that he wasn't really interested in. And so it was, actually one of the tougher interviews that we did, though he gave me amazing stuff. And then after we broke down the shot, and we're just sort of shooting the shit afterwards, I'm like, Jeff, actually in college I was in a production of Escanaba and the Moonlight. And the next thing you know, we're like hitting it off, and he's telling me all these stories. And I was like, if only I would have had that moment to tell him that before the interview, it would have been 100% different, And it was like, that's part of documentary filmmaking is, expect the unexpected and try to be prepared. And my plan was to try to cut him off in the lobby of where we were at to talk to him about it. But I went in to check to make sure the shot was ready, and I turned around and there was Jeff. And as he saw that the shot was ready, as a pro, he's like, all right, let's do it. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to him seeing the movie. He hasn't seen it yet because he's on Broadway. He's doing it like at least a show, maybe 2 shows every day.
Wow.
Just crazy busy.
Yeah, so good thing you're able to get him there too. So switching gears a little bit to obviously the serious part, and what's obviously a focus of the film too is the accident and everything.
Yeah.
And I know it's difficult to approach it with some of them because each one has a different reaction and emotional connection and feel to it of how they've gone through the process as well. So how did you approach this subject matter, and knowing how difficult an event it was, not just for the organization, for the players, for everybody? So how did you approach it during the interviews?
At first I made the mistake of just doing the interviews chronologically, starting with the Russians coming, or if, it's like Joe Kosher starting with the Dead Wings, and working my way towards, the end of the story. And I realized that wasn't effective because when we were talking about the parade, everyone's demeanor started to change. And so we actually don't really get into you don't see anyone in the film talk about the parade specifically because a lot of those responses were sort of colored by the knowledge of whoever was saying it, that the next question I was about to ask was about the limo accident. And like, they just get tense, and everyone would just get kind of, they knew it was coming. And, Sergei broke down. Sergei shut down that line of questioning. He was like, in the film you see him say something along the lines of like, I'm not crazy about this question about limo accident. And when we don't had time to include in the film was the rest of the statement, which was, it's just like, sorry guys, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I tried to prepare myself, but it's just still not going away. It's still too hard. And like, I could see that. I could see the pain on his face. And then when I asked him a follow-up question about the fan response, he started to actually tear up. And he was already late for his meeting, so at that point I was like, okay, if I keep pushing this, I think he's going to shut down on me completely. John Wharton, his job was to be at the hospital with Vladimir Konstantinov just as the team trainer and liaison with the medical professionals. And so, like, for him, it was extremely emotional to talk about it. And actually, while we were doing his interview, there was like some distracting noises going on when we were talking about this. And John just was like so frustrated because he didn't want to talk about it, and he just wanted to like rip it off like a Band-Aid. And every time we tried to rip it off, we're like, sorry, hold. We have to hold for the sound. So yeah, you know, it's the heart of the emotional, or I should say it's the emotional heart of the story, and that what these guys all went through together, becoming a family, which was the key to them winning the Stanley Cup. And they felt like family to us, you know, as fans. To have one of your family members, you know, in a situation where you're not sure if he's going to live or die, it's really heavy, and it's traumatic, and it's, you know, the Red Wings, that team could have gone one of two ways. They could have let that tragedy really just break their spirits and just, you know, they could have folded the next season and missed the playoffs, distracted and missing one of the best defensemen in the league at the time, and maybe to ever play the game. But instead, because they had become a family, they rallied around their fallen brother, and they responded as a family, and they said, we're going to win it for him. And so you see that, and I don't think it's a coincidence that there's only, you know, they're one of two back-to-back Stanley Cup champions in like 30 years almost. And it's, winning the Stanley Cup is really, really hard. And I think without that emotional drive to go back to it, I don't know that it's possible, you know. It's extremely difficult.
No, absolutely. And so now for you as a filmmaker, I mean, what does it mean to you to have this story being told and you being the one to be able to accomplish that, and then getting recognized? I mean, it's winning awards at film festivals, and it's touring the country, and it's going to all these different cities. So I know it's hard for people to talk about themselves sometimes, but for you, what does it mean that you've been able to, after all these years, almost 7 years now, being able to see it from idea to fruition, that people are seeing this and enjoying this film?
It's cool. You know, I don't know that any of that still hit me yet because we're so deep in it, and every time I think that I have a moment to start to take a breath and put my life back together like a normal person, we open up 12 cities on a weekend. It's like, oh, all right, we're back into it already. But the fact that we're opening 12 cities this weekend is incredible because it means that people want to see this movie, and it means that there's an interest, and that interest is being driven by the fans who, whether they've seen the trailer or they just want to see the story, are asking for it. And that's just humbling to me. The response has been humbling. You know, the awards are humbling. The 99% on Rotten Tomatoes is humbling. And for me, like, I made this movie because of Vladimir Konstantinov inspired me to keep pushing through my personal injury and surgeries and life difficulties, situations, whatever you want to call it. And so Vladdy has been at both of our premieres, our world premiere last April, and then he was at our theatrical premiere in March. And I got to sit with him to watch the theatrical premiere in March, and to watch his face light up when he watched it and was able to relive the glory moments when he was who he is, was incredible. And then when We Are the Champions started playing in the movie, he started singing it. And I got man tears, right? Like, it was really, really emotional. And actually I had to, like, leave the box that we were all sitting in and compose myself because it was so emotional. And his daughter told Darren McCarty later on that when Vladdy watches this film, it puts him in his happy place. So, you know, Scotty loves the movie, Darren loves the movie, Igor loves the movie, Slava Fetisov loves the movie, Ozzy loves the movie, Draper loves the movie, Maltby loves the movie. I'm trying to think of who else has seen it. Brendan Shanahan loves it. That's all cool. That's all great. But the fact that something that I made is inspiring and moving the person who inspired me is, like, that's kind of the special magic of cinema, I think. And that's really, really cool, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to do that.
Oh no, that is fantastic. Especially when the person that inspired you to do it enjoys it like that. It's just that's words can't even describe that. So I really do hope so many folks here in Nashville and all around the country where it's going to be at go out and see it. And people keep asking, so I'd be adept if I didn't. So after it tours the country, will it be released eventually on DVD, Blu-ray?
Yeah, it'll be iTunes first.
Okay.
And iTunes is coming up next month, actually.
Cool.
We should have a pre-order within the week, actually.
Wow. Okay.
So that'll be exciting. And then, it'll be out on DVD and Blu-ray, and who knows, hopefully we'll get it up on Netflix or, TV and all that stuff. We want everyone to be able to see this, not just hockey fans. And I think that's one of the coolest things that I've really appreciated is my team and I and my incredible editor, David Fabello, we spent a lot of time and care crafting a story that we thought would appeal to people who don't know anything about hockey. And the response so far has confirmed that was a success. Because I didn't want to make just a hockey film. I wanted to make a film about what these 5 special human beings went through and how they impacted all these other human beings that we grew up and cared about. And human stories are what interest me. So, I hope that we can reach not just hockey fans. I hope people in Nashville who are hockey fans bring their friends who don't care about hockey, and at the end of it, they all have something to talk about, and they've introduced them to a sport. We showed the film out in Seattle International Film Festival last May, and I was leaving the first screening, and I was walking behind these two little old ladies, and I was eavesdropping on the conversation. And it turned out that the only reason they went and saw it was because it was the only thing that had fit their film festival schedule at that moment. And the first one was like, "What did you think?" And the second one was like, "I loved it." And the first one was like, "I had never even watched hockey before, but I think I'm a fan now." And to excite these 2 little old ladies was like, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's cool to get the Red Wings fans and the tough burly dude from downriver who's like, "Yeah, I love it." That's awesome. But to get these 2 little old 70-year-old women from Seattle to enjoy the sport of hockey, which we already know is one of the best sports around, if not the most. I mean, it's the most fun sport to watch live, in my opinion. That's pretty cool, and so hopefully we can keep having that experience.
Well, that's extremely inspirational. It makes me even more excited to see it just talking with you, and I can't thank you enough for taking 30 minutes. I didn't realize it was going to go that long, but for taking that much time to speak with me on this, and I can't wait to share the interview with everybody, and just thank you so much. This speaks right to my childhood as well, how I grew up when I moved to Nashville, and I had to move away from being able to watch the team I enjoy playing, watching my idols play, and had to go through newspaper clippings because it was the 90s and everything. So thank you for helping me tell this.
Have NHL streaming and all that.
Yeah. So thank you from a hockey fan to you. So thank you for telling the story.
You're welcome. Thank you for talking to me and all the support. I mean, this is the thing. Is in a weird way, kind of making this film reminds us of trying to win the Stanley Cup, which is you can't do it without a great team in place, and you can't do it without the fan support and people cheering you on and supporting you and telling everyone else this is something worth its time and energy to watch. Because I mean, that's what, as a filmmaker, you want people to see the movie in the theaters together, right? And so people have a chance. So hopefully they take it up, and I just appreciate it. So thank you.